Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Carl Jennings, the owner of InfoSpan. Good afternoon, Carl.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Oh, absolutely, sure. So I attended City College and Queens College. I went to Queens undergrad, majoring in philosophy, social sciences, and cultural studies. And I got a BA there, magna cum laude. I then went on to get a master's as a developmental remedial reading specialist, and I got GPA awards during the course of that part of my educational training and development. And sandwiched in between that I didn't mention, I also received training at the Yale University Division of Training and Consultation in the Department of Psychiatry in the medical school at Yale, where I learned an approach to doing organizational development work that actually provided me a broader understanding and greater insight into the NTL tradition, from which, I come out of and that I work out of. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a vast educational background.
Well, it's been, it's not as much as some of my colleagues that have a whole bunch of letters after their names.
It's funny you say that. My daughter she was a research scientist at Carnegie Mellon. And
Yes.
I tell her how smart she was. She goes, "Oh no, these other people are so much smarter than me." And I say, "No, they've just been doing it longer than you."
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Yes.
So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employer and an employee?
Okay. So not as an employer, as a result of my working consultatively,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but in instances, so there have been projects, that I've worked on where I've required additional expertise and assistance, and I would bring people on. But I've been working remotely for over 24 years, going on
Wow.
24 years. Yeah, yeah. So I started this approach, they say necessity is the mother of invention, as a result of my getting an assignment in December of 1997
Mm.
with a friend and colleague, a guy that I'd met, who had a business in Europe, an international institutional investment and trading business. He worked internationally, based in the Herrengracht, and he got there because he was with Drexel Burnham,
Mm.
and when they shut down, he stayed and decided he was going to start a business. And at this particular point in time, and it was, it was at the right time because I needed to make a change. He phoned me up and says, "Look, I need you full blast." He says, "I'm coming to the United States. I'm bringing my management team. I got a house up in Massachusetts. I need you to work with us." And so I'm listening and I'm saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. He says,
Mm-hmm.
but it's 2.5 weeks away. And I says, "Well, wow, that's a little tricky." I says, "Because you're in Europe, I'm here. Go to Europe, collect data, come back, look at it, So I says, "You've got access to computers and the fax machine." I says, "If I send you a protocol, can you have it completed in 24 hours and get it back to me?" He says, "Sure." So I did that. I sent it to him. And as I sent it to him, it occurred to me, I said, this is my model
Mm-hmm.
for providing organizational development, consulting services, utilizing the internet and the web,
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then as I thought through it, I says, yeah, this really works because what I'll do is I'll have them complete this protocol. They'll send it back to me. The first day I get together with them, I'll spend time establishing a connection between what's on paper and what I'm experiencing, So I
Mm-hmm.
says, this works well. And it's good on the client side because expenses are minimized.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're comfortable, with my presenting you my findings and talking about next steps by way of these tools, we're eliminating travel, lodging,
Mm-hmm.
meals, etc. So it's appealing, and it's stuck, and it's worked well.
Interesting, but you said 97. I mean, if I remember right, I mean, there definitely wasn't the internet as we know it today. If I remember, it was either 56K baud modem or maybe DSL had just come out. Is that correct?
Precisely. And so all I was getting, that's why I also said via fax machine, because
Mm-hmm.
all I was getting were answers to questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just getting answers to questions
Wow.
because, because, I needed to understand who the people are that I'm working with, what are
Mm-hmm.
their capabilities, how do they connect? What are the issues, etc. Those were the kinds of things I needed to get a grasp around. But so, to your point, I've been trying to do this since Ray Ozzy's, what was the name of the tool that he came up with, that Ray Ozzy came up with?
I don't remember.
Yeah. It didn't have a video component, but it afforded you an opportunity to work in groups.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't. Well, it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people, not a lot, but I've talked to a few people that started working remotely back in the 90s. You're the first one I've talked to that did it, in a different continent. That's truly remarkable.
Yes.
A lot of people would back then would have a customer and then they would go home and work, but they would still go see the customer,
Yes.
like once a week. I mean, you truly were remote. As for then, you were probably one of the most remote people in the entire planet.
Well, yeah. Well, in fact, I have a mentee at he's out of Case Western. He's with Google now, and he tells me, he says, I'm the first in the space, to make an explicit declaration that this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm doing. Yeah. What I also wanted to say, so after Ray's contribution, there was a platform called DimDim.
Mm-hmm.
There was WebEx. We know there was Uvu. So
yeah.
As a result of the work I went through all of those tools, and I continued working with this guy. We continued working on projects, and we went through all of these tools, because I only saw him maybe once or twice a year, but we were communicating and working on all these projects by way of these tools. So it was affording us, and they kept getting better and better and better.
Right, they did.
Yeah, with Zoom being the
latest,
the best of what's available at present, bar the security issues and
right,
and support and that sort of thing.
Well, and that brings me to my next question. Really, was what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think can be done differently to make it even more effective? Because you have to have seen a lot of changes in 24 years.
Absolutely. So I think that what needs to happen, and this is one of the things I'm very tightly focused on, and that is understanding what the needs are of the various category of business and organizational users are, so that the tools can be more specifically adapted to the needs that each type of organization and business have. So I've been very fortunate, to witness during this whole COVID thing, a creative performing artist group utilize these tools. In one instance, working for 13 hours. I mean, I could not believe it. Classes being taught, teaching, acting Shakespeare.
Really?
Being taught, inclusive of warm-ups with music and physical exercises done through the box, coming, by way, flip chart in the background, illustrating types of speech, couplets, etc., how to do them, having the people do them, doing monologues and presentations, and getting the same kind of coaching, having the same kind of coaching experience that they would were they in a classroom.
Wow.
And then, and I've had an engineer that we hired back in '82, who worked with a small AI firm. And so the situation there was, he says, well, Carl, when we interact, typically it's wire diagrams and the engineers aren't seeing one another. He says they immediately go to what it is they're doing. I says, that's interesting, I says, because you have no way of knowing, save what you're talking about and what you're looking at. You have no way of knowing what's really going on, because greater than 70% of what we communicate, is nonverbal. And so he says, he says, Carl, I never thought about that. And he says, I'll keep that in mind. So the next time he had a meeting, they were talking, and they stopped for a while, and they turned off the machine. And he says, Carl, that was great. He says, because I was able to see, pictures of family and other things that we could have a conversation about to strengthen the connection between us.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really, and college professors, that are having various kinds of experiences, and it made me aware of the fact that my protocol is great, all things being near equal. Mm-hmm. But in some instances, some students, as a result of their having to go home, they didn't want the professor and other students seeing their homes.
Really?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Well, these are students
right.
that come from working class backgrounds, or
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my days in college. I didn't want mom to see my home.
and you want people to know you the way they know you at school,
right? And
so these are very important considerations. So I'm saying, so I says, well, so in some instances you can't adhere specifically to my protocol.
Right.
You have to adapt to the realities existing, in the situation you find yourself in.
Very interesting. Oh, wow. So what is the story behind InfoSpan? I mean, what is the service you provide, and who is your typical client?
So my clients can be any organization, because the nature of OD consulting, as you probably know, you're consulting to an area that transcends type and kind of business or organization, because you're looking at what's happening behaviorally, and you're looking at how those behaviors connect or not to the specific functions, tasks, roles that individuals in the organization are expected to perform. And so one of the things I say, I have a way of contextualizing organizations. I say, so organizations operate in an interdependent environment. And I say, so there are three principal subsystems that determine how they function. Mm-hmm. And that's people, technology, and money. Mm-hmm. And so in order for you to maximally benefit from what each subsystem provides in sustaining and putting forth your distinctive and core competence, these subsystems must work optimally within themselves and between one another. And this is different for every business and every organization. And so then my responsibility is to help, decode and find out what those connections and what those relationships are. Because what they all boil down to is what one of our colleagues, most senior guy, Dr. Ed Shine, says, the most finite point of interaction, in an organization, a business, or a group, or whatever, is the face-to-face connection, person-to-person connection. And so that's why, for me, these tools are very important, and why they need to be worked with and calibrated to the needs that businesses and organizations and groups and areas of specialization have. And there are lots of differences. Mm-hmm. So there's much to be done with respect to that. Yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, typically, what's the average size of a company or organization you deal with?
Oh, sure. So I have, working in this way, they have been small primarily to, what's the largest? The largest is a CPA firm that I worked with for a number of years. I did some really important work, with and for them. They were 25 size. There were 25 people. And one of the things I did with them that was really important was sourcing the talent to do a project for the federal government, where they were identifying people who had paid too much into the system, and they had to pay them back. And so it required a technologist, minimally an MBA, DBA, who knew stats and who could work out all the formulas, to put all that together.
Mhm.
And then they also needed a training program that was really effective, that
Hmm.
would result in the persons working, for the firm to get on the phone and communicate and interact really effectively, with the folks, who were owed money. And that project lasted for 3 years, and the firm made $20 million off of that project. So that,
Wow.
yeah,
So
yeah,
apparently you helped them with their money side of it.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Cool. So,
yes.
and just to give me an idea of what is the size of your company. I'm assuming you have people that come in and out, right? And how do you incorporate remote at your company?
I'm sorry, say that again. I missed the last part you just
How
said.
do you incorporate the idea of working remotely at your company, or does it just come naturally?
Well, it comes naturally. People. So I'll share a quick story with you. So my professional organization, NTL Institute for Applied Behavioral Science, right? So I've been doing this for going on 24 years. Last year, we're in a meeting, and the person, who's from Europe, who's responsible for managing member relations, also headed up the technology hub at the time. And so
Hmm.
he says, well, Carl works, he works, with technology, and he makes presentations, etc., virtually. He says, but he doesn't do webinar. I says, no. He says, what do you do? I says, well, I do virtual learning events,
Hmm.
because I maintain that the concept of webinar, nowhere in that is the requisite understanding of what it's necessary and important for people to know and take into consideration when they're working in this way
Hmm.
with people, to get the most out of what it is you're attempting to do. And so this is, well, virtual learning event. I says, wow. She says, well, can we use that? I says, yeah, the organization, because you do things for your organization. I says, yes, you just acknowledge it's mine, it's trademark. I says, fine. And so that led to our organization deciding that, as you can imagine, we're more analog, than we are digital. So
Hmm.
I'm saying, but you need to make this move. And the board has accepted that. So I'm working with them and a person who's a e-learning expert
Hmm.
in migrating a lot of their offerings to the virtual space.
Hmm.
That's one of the things I'm working on presently. And typically I'm either working alone, or I'm working with a specialist in a content area. So
Hmm.
I was involved with the same individual that I did the work with in Europe. We had a startup, a fintech startup,
Hmm.
and we rode this for 3 years. We had not first mover, we had preeminent position for 3 years. Our competitor had 50 million because
Hmm.
he came from highly resourced circumstances, and
Hmm.
we had 118,000,
Wow.
and we were capable of developing a solution that was more desirable and had more features than what our competitor
Wow.
had in the marketplace. But the market moved away from us as a result of our inability to getting the remaining money. But one of the things that came out of that was really important is that we partnered with an AI firm in Seattle.
Hmm.
And in our first meeting, we were going around introducing ourselves, and I said who I am and what I do as a part of the team. And the CEO says, Carl, he says, I'm glad that you're on the team.
Hmm.
He said, because organization development provides a very meaningful and useful service to
Hmm.
business. He says, particularly startups, you know. He
Hmm.
says, because there's so much waste that goes on. And I says, and if you have, this kind of support, I said, a lot of that, can be done away with. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it works out really well.
Yeah.
And so that reinforced, for me, the whole idea that, I was on the right course and we were making an effort to do the right thing. Yeah.
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 When you probably know better than me, but it seems like most startups, they have someone that has a really good idea and has the technical competence to do it themselves, but they really don't know how to run an organization.
Precisely.
Usually they're younger and they very intelligent
Yes.
and lots of energy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
They
Which is
need,
great.
right? No, and that's what you need to get it off the ground.
Yes. Yes.
But then once it's off the ground, it takes a different skill set.
That's absolutely right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
I've actually worked for a couple of those myself.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I know you have. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's super when you can get. So we had I spoke to him a couple of days ago, a conceptual engineer, because the person that came up with the idea was the CEO of the business in Europe, right?
Mhm.
And so as a result of his being, in Europe at that time doing trading, he really had a really good understanding of markets. And there was a recurring pattern that emerged wherein he saw that if a tool could be developed for purposes of addressing the liquidity issue in the bond market,
Mhm.
like a dog whistle, to enable buyers and sellers to identify one another, without alerting everyone else so that you get distortions in the marketplace, well, that's a good thing. And two, if it also has the capacity, so you remember what I want to buy,
Mhm.
and I remember what you're selling. And in addition to that, there's a knowledge store that's developing over time.
Yeah.
And so it was sound. And the person that did the architecting and translated all this into, software language and so forth,
Mhm.
was a 24-year-old kid.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, I mean, I'm in Silicon Valley. There's
Yes.
a lot of very talented kids coming out of the local schools here.
Yes. Yes. But they could use a little guidance and a little discipline. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I told you, my daughter has her degree, is her master's in computer science from Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah.
And I've had talks with her and her friend, and it's like, oh my God, these kids are smart.
Yes. Yes.
Which is great.
Yes, it is. And much and very much needed as well.
Yeah. So
And very much needed. Yes.
Yeah, so the pandemic that we're just starting to come out of it. I actually got my hair cut today. It was such a good feeling.
Wow, that's great.
Um,
You're
but
the envy of a lot of people.
I know I was one of the first ones in California, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
But it forced everyone to go remote right around mid-March. Did that cause any roadblocks or challenges that you didn't expect?
Well, it didn't. The problem that it caused was that it exacerbated the pre-existing problems
Mm-hmm.
for businesses, organizations, and particularly academia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which has been suffering tremendously as a result of their having a centuries-old business model,
Yes.
that's totally out of line with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the advent of COVID-19, I mean, you're slammed, and you're having to reorient yourself, consistent with what's going on around you, and you're the least capable.
Mm-hmm.
And but for me, this is really, really important, because for me, what it says is that whatever you believe in, it's most high, whatever, most important, what you value, it's tapping humanity on the shoulder
Mm-hmm.
and saying, this relationship thing, there's something to this.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to think about what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Given your inability to engage in some of the most basic and necessary human interaction that goes on, not to mention its impact, on the economy, and the functioning of sectors, nations, the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I make sense of that as being something that's incredibly instructive, and attention getting. And, so it's what it's resulted in. Well, it's been super for Zoom and other virtual communication providers, because were it not for that, we would not be able to continue doing business.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And engaging in those meaningful interactions and exchanges that we all must engage in. But,
Mm-hmm.
I says, boy, there's hope. Excuse me, because my 95-year-old father-in-law,
Mm-hmm.
a colleague sent me a video
Hmm.
on coronavirus, on COVID-19, and it motivated him to learning Zoom because he wanted to see it, and he also wanted to talk to us about it afterwards.
Yeah, and I have a similar experience. My mother, who's 90,
Yes.
shortly after Corona hit, I'm one of 8 kids, so we decided to have a family Zoom. And mom is on it every week. And it's it's the highlight of the week for her, but she learned how to use Zoom. So
That's fantastic.
yeah, and it's interesting because now she gets to see once a week, not only all of her children, but her grandchildren and now her 2 great-grandchildren.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So this engineer I mentioned previously that we hired, he has a similar experience because his mom is in upstate New York.
Mm.
And he says, and once a week, he says, we get on, and she says she's there, and she sees everybody, and everybody better be there.
Yeah, right. And it means so much to them.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Even us, it's brought us closer together as a family, I think.
See, that's extraordinary. And my wife has been, she's it's because she's a theater artist, she's a playwright, progressive theater, she says, Carl, I interact with people directly. And the kinds of responses that she has been getting, from her, when she finished up, she just retired, from the department, from the students, going back and saying, what a great course. It's been incredible. And she says, be quiet, don't say anything. and I say to her, but I says, but this reinforces what you maintain, because you need the technology, but it's you coming with the technology.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. And so these are the kinds of things that really excite me and that I want to be able to help, people learn and adapt to and shape. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because once you get into it and you're working with it, you find ways to do things that weren't previously.
Yeah, I mean, we were all forced to, and we adapted pretty quickly. I have to say, we really did. I'd say it was maybe 2 weeks it was really uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I think at the start of that 3rd week, people were like, okay, we're in this for a while, so let's figure this out.
Let's figure it out. Yeah. Yes.
And I know I've talked to other CEOs that they're building products to improve on this.
Yes. Yes.
So it's coming.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I've got some I've got some ideas, about some things that I'd like to see happen, and that I'd like to do, and I'm hopeful that that we're gonna get there.
Great. So
yes.
So we'll finish up with. I'm just going to ask you a quick question. There's companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products, and especially for startups. And you deal with a lot of startups. It sounds like.
Yes.
How important do you think that is going to be? How important do you think it is now, and how important do you think it will be going forward for startups? That, as you know, they need to hire really good talent, and they need to hire them in a hurry to stay competitive. How important do you think that will be?
I think that would be, quite important. So, for example, companies like Gaper are an important part of the emerging business ecosystem because they can make useful and much needed contributions to the development of that technological subsystem, we spoke to previously. And, I'm convening this virtual organization development forum, which is my organization that's been responsible for development of this VLE protocol, to further illustrate this. But there is a tremendous need for companies, like Gaper, who can identify, the requisite talent that needed, vet them, and get them into the systems, where the services that are required, can be made use of. Absolutely. Yes.
Most CEOs I talk to, they actually say one of the hardest parts of their job and that they didn't expect when they started out was talent acquisition. And it takes a lot of time.
It does. It does. And I was super impressed to discover, that you guys are handling, the top 1%. I mean, so that's and how long have you been around? Because I asked a lot of people, I go, it's like, Watson looking for Livingston. I say to folks, I said, "Have you heard of Gaper?" He says, "No, I've not heard of Gaper." And then when I say who you are and what you do, they said, "Wow, okay."
Mhm. Yeah,
You know?
yeah, we have specific ways we do that. And I personally have been doing IT for 40 years. I've managed teams across 4 continents.
Yes,
So that's the expertise we bring, is that there's, if you're not ready to have a remote team, there's certain things you really have to do. It's not like you just say, you hire, bring in a team and say, okay, go build this.
that's right.
Doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, even if you hire them in your office. But
That's absolutely right. Yeah,
so,
yeah,
but there's a certain skill to hiring a remote team and keeping them busy.
precisely. Yes.
And
And,
yeah,
and
you actually have to. I
I'm
think
sorry, you go ahead.
well, you have something coming up on this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So, some of your listeners may be interested in joining us for the first in a series of virtual learning events that feature OD and ABS professionals who made important contributions to the utilization of digital tools for improving leadership and organizational performance. This first event will showcase my virtual learning event protocol. Experientially, you'll get a chance to feel what it looks like going through the process, and it will also be a takeaway in the form of a PDF for all of the attendees.
Cool.
In addition to other very specific outcomes, that people can expect as a result of having participated, and all that information, is made available, and it can be provided to interested persons if they send me an email at vodf@infospan.com. And then I can also make available to you a direct connect, so you can have that in your records as well.
Okay.
If I can make that available to folks.
Yes. That's great. And when does that start?
It's Saturday, September. July 11th.
Okay.
And we do it on a Saturday because a lot of people, are they're working. Not everybody is a consultant, or has as much control over their time. That will be in attendance, and so it's from 1:00 p.m. to 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, I will make sure I include that.
I thank you so much for that.
So, well, Carl, this has been fascinating. You obviously have a lot of experience in remote development and remote working in general. I want to thank you for your time today, and I know it's happy hour time there in Washington where you are. So I'll let you start your weekend.
I so appreciate it, and thank you so much, and thanks for having me.